Okay, and welcome back to another GED RLA video with Phuket Pals. In this one, we're going to be looking at questions 7 to 17 from this particular past exam. Okay, so in this one, we have two speeches here, one by President Franklin Roosevelt from 1941 here, and then we have another one by President Dwight Eisenhower from 1961. Okay, now, as you can see, these speeches are pretty long, and students often open their test. And what they'll do, many students, they'll just start by reading from the top. Okay, they'll start from reading here. They'll go, just as our national policy and you don't have time. Okay, you really don't have time to go through every single word of this. So you have to use your time more effectively. It could take you 10 minutes or more, 15 minutes reading all of this and getting some kind of comprehension out of it. So you need to go straight to the question and see if you can make your life any easier. So question 7 is the first one, and it says, identify President Roosevelt and Eisenhower's views of the US military by writing one answer choice in each of the appropriate columns. Okay, so you can see A, B, C, D here. In the real test, you would drag A into Roosevelt, if that was his opinion of the US military, or D into Eisenhower, for example, if that was his view of the military. This is not a real test. We don't have the drag and drop function, so we will just circle the right answer when we get it. Okay, so let's first of all look at these options here and see what there is. So A says the military is almost large enough to begin conquering other nations. So military large enough to begin conquering other nations. Nations are countries, of course, okay? Keywords. The military is not yet large enough, okay? Not yet large enough to defend the nation and the world. Okay. The military is too large because its spending is out of control. Too large. The military is necessarily large, but should be watched carefully. Okay, so necessarily large should be watched carefully. So let's go up to the first reading passage and see if we can find where Roosevelt talks about the military. Okay, so we're looking for the military. So we have to scan through here. We have to scan through and see what's going on. Okay, so let's see if we can see military anywhere. Okay, we're still searching. Maybe here, there's some stuff here about peacetime, implements of peace at wartime. We'll come back to that now. Okay, so I think it's probably going to be around here. So if we think we found a spot which is relevant because it talks about wartime. And remember, we're looking for their view on the US military here. So it says to change a whole nation from a basis of peacetime production of implements of peace to a basis of wartime production of the implements of war is no small task. Okay, so basically, to go from a peacetime war production to wartime war production is difficult. And the greatest difficulty comes at the beginning of the program, when new tools, new plant facilities, and new assembly lines, new shipways must first be constructed before the actual materials begin to flow steadily and speedily from them. New circumstances are constantly begetting new needs. For our safety, I shall ask this Congress for greater increased new appropriations and authorizations to carry on what we have begun. Okay, so basically he's saying here that the nation is going to be transitioning from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy. And it's very difficult to do this because they need all these things like new tools, new facilities, new assembly lines, and stuff. So the president is asking Congress to allow them to do more of this, probably to increase the budget so that they can carry on what they have begun. Okay, so probably something connected to that. We'll see if any of these are relevant. The military is almost large enough to begin. No, because he's saying the military is not, they don't have enough provisions. They don't have enough, the military is not large enough yet. So it can't be A for Roosevelt. The military is not yet large enough to defend the nation and the world. It could be that. The military is too large? No. The military is necessarily large, but should be watched carefully? No. He's saying it's not large enough. So I would definitely go B there. I think B is the closest we can get out of those answers. Okay, so let's try Eisenhower. Okay, so now we can take out B out of the equation and we'll see what Eisenhower has to say. Okay, so where does he talk about the military? Okay, military here. Okay, it's a vital element in keeping the peace that is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Okay, we'll come back to that. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known by any of my predecessors in peacetime or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. Okay. This conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. So he's saying this size of the military production and the army itself is huge. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend. We recognize the need for it, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. So it could be dangerous. Maybe it's getting too big. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Okay. So I think if we look here, the military is almost large enough to begin conquering nations. No, we've done B already. The military is too large because its spending's out of control. So the military, maybe. The military is necessarily large, but should be watched carefully. I think it's probably D. I think it is D. Okay. He's not saying its spending is out of control. He is saying it's big. Okay. Because he mentioned it gets into every aspect of our lives. Necessarily large, but should be watched carefully. He's just saying we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence. So we have to be careful that this doesn't get out of control. So that would be, watch carefully. So it would be D there. D is the correct answer. Okay, number 8. What is an assumption about the United States in Roosevelt's speech? What is an assumption? So we have to assume. Okay, so again, this is kind of critical thinking here. There isn't an exact answer immediately. So we have to infer based on the evidence. And what does infer mean? Or what does it mean to make an assumption? It means that you look at the evidence that's available, and then you make a guess based on, like an educated guess based on that available evidence. So number 8, we're looking at Roosevelt's speech again, an assumption about the United States. So let's go up. So if we go back to the same bit we were on there, to change a whole nation from the basis of peacetime production to the implements of peace to a basis of wartime production of the implements of war is no small task. Okay, so he's talking about, again, like we said before, changing from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy, building up all of these new things like tools, facilities, assembly lines, everything that will enable the war to happen. Okay, and then he asks Congress to increase spending, probably, to help him carry on what we have begun. So if they're looking to change their economy from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy, they must be preparing for war. It's quite simple. So if we go down, what assumption about the US is in Roosevelt's speech? It was building arms to give to other nations. Nonsense. It was planning to stay out of other nations' conflicts. Nonsense. It was working to promote international peace. Maybe it was preparing for the likelihood of world war. Much more likely there because they're building up their economy from peacetime to wartime. So they're past the stage of promoting international peace. The time for war is upon them and they are preparing in a relevant way. If you also look at the year of Roosevelt's speech, Uh, sorry. Yes, if you look at the year of Roosevelt's speech, 1941. Yeah, so it's right in the middle of World War II, on the early stages of World War II, 1939 to 1945. So, yeah, this is when the US got brought in to the Second World War. So that fits. This is not a time. This is not a time of peace. Okay, so D has to be the correct answer. Number 9, based on the details in both speeches, what advice might Roosevelt and Eisenhower give to an incoming president? Based on the details in both speeches, what advice might Roosevelt and Eisenhower give to an incoming president? Okay, so we have maintain a large military operation, keep the military out of world conflicts, let the voters decide how big the military should be, build the world's most respected military. Okay, so if we go up to what Roosevelt was talking about, okay, he was talking about changing. He was talking at a time war was coming and war was coming quick, and he's trying to build up the military. So definitely Roosevelt would give that information. Would Eisenhower give that information? Uh, yeah, look here. So he's saying we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. Okay, so we can we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. So, yeah, Eisenhower's saying that in the past, okay, in the past, uh, okay, one moment. A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Okay, so he says it in the first sentence there. If you want to keep the peace, you need the military so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Okay, so yeah, both of these guys recognize the importance of having a strong military. So it's probably A, maintain a large military operation, keep the military out of world conflicts, nonsense, let voters decide how big the military should be. Doesn't mention anything about that. Build the world's most respected military. No, it could be that, but it's more likely to be A, isn't it? Maintain a large military operation. So A is the most likely answer you can get there. All right, number 10. Moving on. What do the two presidents' speeches have in common? Both employ emotional language to sway listeners. So, is there emotional language in there? Both use a formal style to communicate serious ideas. Well, there are definitely serious ideas contained in both of these, and they're definitely both quite formal. So, it's probably this. Both present evidence from experts to support their claims. We'll come back to it. Both aim at an audience likely to agree with the speakers. Okay, so let's go and have a look. Do they both use? Let's look at the emotive language first. So, um, is the language emotive? Like, is he trying? Is Roosevelt trying to stir emotions in the people listening to this speech? No, it's more formal. In the recent national election, by an impressive expression of public will. Uh, so not so much, not so much emotive language that I can see in here. Is there any? Yeah, there's also not any. I don't see any experts giving their evidence there. So it can't be that. Emotional language. Let's see if this. Yeah, so the first one doesn't have the emotional language in it, so that means it can't be both of these. It has to. They both have to agree. They have to both have to have in common, which leaves us with it B or D. Both aim at an audience likely to agree with the speakers. Well, it's highly unlikely that the audience will agree with both of them. So the first, let's just have a look here. Yeah, I think it's much more likely to be B here. Both aim at an audience likely to agree with them. Well, that's not how it works in a democracy. In democracy, you have different people with different ideas, different groups. So they wouldn't be aiming at people who support. They both use a formal style to communicate serious ideas. They're both talking about war and building up the war, the military, etc. So it's a very serious and formal style is used. 11. Which idea from Eisenhower's speech supports his claim that the US military is a vast organization? Which idea from Eisenhower's speech supports his claim that the US military is a vast organization? Okay, let's see Eisenhower's speech. Fly up here. Have to scan through. Oh, here. This is relevant. Okay. So it says, added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Here it is, we annually spend on military security more than the net income of all United States corporations. So the large companies in the US. So I think that is the correct answer. More was spent on the military than all corporate profits combined. That seems to fit with what we just read, doesn't it? Where'd it go? Here. We annually spend on the military security more than the net income, of all United States corporations. This is it. This is the answer for sure. Yeah, more spent in the military than other corporate profits combined. Yeah. The influence of the military is felt in every American home. I think C's closer though. B, Americans should worry about the military's rapidly expanding power. I don't think they would. That wouldn't be used to support the fact that it's a vast organization. Neither would that. The American public should be aware of the military's methods, not relevant. It can only be C. It has to be C there. Okay. Number 12. According to both speeches, which is the most valid reason for building and maintaining a strong military? Okay. So to inspire fear in America's enemies? Maybe. To keep the peace in troubled cities? Probably not, because it's more about defending the US. To prepare for conflicts abroad? Probably. To boost the failing economy? Don't think so. In fact, about fear? No, it's more about preparing for conflicts abroad. It's less about instilling fear. Well, that's what the politician would tell you anyway. Who knows? Yeah, so I would definitely go C there. Number 13. How does paragraph 3 of Eisenhower's speech build upon his claim in paragraph 2? Okay, so how does paragraph 3 of Eisenhower's speech build upon his claim in paragraph 2? Okay, so let's look at the claim of paragraph 2 and then see how paragraph 3 builds on that. So paragraph 2, what is the claim? Let's look for the claim. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known by any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Okay. So basically he's saying that the way the military is at this point in time is nothing, it doesn't look anything like it was in World War II or Korea. Okay, then he goes on. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But now we can no longer risk emergency provision of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent arms industry of vast proportions. Okay, so they have to have a perpetual war machine, something that's always making weapons and things for the military. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on the military security more than the net income of all the United States. So in the claim made here, we can infer that the military is much smaller than it was World War II and Korea. And then he builds upon that by saying, we can't do that anymore. We need to have a permanent industry for making weapons, planes, all that type of stuff. So let's see if that helps us with the question. Okay, how does paragraph 3 of his speech build upon his claim in paragraph 2? It refutes the argument that the military's influence has grown. No, it doesn't. Doesn't go against the argument at all. It illustrates the idea that the military's role has changed. Kind of, yeah. It supports the point that maintaining a large military has risks. It's not about risks because he wants a bigger military because he says it's necessary now. It provides the assertion that Americans should be wary of the military. No, they shouldn't be wary of it. It has to be B, okay? It illustrates the idea that the military's role has changed over time. Yes, it has. It's changed from World War II and Korea. They had a much bigger military and armaments industry. But since then, according to the speech, we can infer that has declined. And we know that Eisenhower wants to build that back up again and make a permanent one. Okay, question, where are we? 14. Which is relevant evidence in support of Roosevelt's claim that it's no small task to build up the US military? Okay. So, which is relevant evidence in support of Roosevelt's claim that it's no small task to build up the US military? Factories, shipways, and other facilities had to be built first. Could be. Industry leaders joined the effort to make the war equipment. No, it's about if Roosevelt's saying it's no small task to build up the military, that means it's difficult. If something is no small task, it means it's difficult. So if industry leaders join the effort, that would make it easier. So it can't be that. Production of the airplanes was far behind the warships. Well, there are only two things, really. Maybe not. American voters agreed on the need for building up the military. It's not relevant either. Must be A. Factory, shipways, and other facilities. Yeah. So all of these things had to be built first. The factories, the shipways, all the other. This is like the base layer for building an armaments industry up. And it would take a lot of time and a lot of money. This is C's too specific about airplanes and warships. Too specific. This is about the base layer. The factories, the warships, other facilities had to be built first. That's why it was no small task to build up the US military. It was difficult. Okay. I think that is about enough for today. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.